The rain pounded against the windshield as Ethan Montgomery, a billionaire with more money than he could ever spend, drove through the dimly lit streets of the city. The world outside was cold, indifferent, just like him. For years, he had drowned himself in business, deals, and numbers, pushing aside anything remotely human. But that night, something made him slow down. At the corner of a deserted sidewalk, under the flickering glow of a street lamp, two small figures huddled together. Two little girls, their tiny frames trembling, their arms wrapped tightly around each other. Tears mixed with raindrops on their pale cheeks. Ethan frowned, gripping the steering wheel. What were they doing out here alone? Where were their parents? He wasn't the type to care, but something about the way they clung to each other, as if they were the only thing keeping each other alive, made his chest tighten. He pulled over. Rolling down the window, he called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "Hey, you two, where's your family?" The girls flinched. One of them, the slightly braver one, lifted her tear-streaked face and met his gaze. We don't have anywhere to go." Ethan exhaled sharply. He didn't need this. He had a million things to do, a life that didn't involve playing hero. But as he stared at them, so small, so helpless, something inside him shifted. Without another word, he stepped out into the rain. "Come with me." The girls hesitated. They weren't used to kindness, but the cold, the hunger, the exhaustion, it was too much. After a long pause, they finally nodded. Ethan led them to his car, turning up the heat as soon as they were inside. He glanced at them through the rearview mirror, their eyes still filled with fear, but also a tiny flicker of hope. As the city lights blurred past, Ethan had no idea that this single act of kindness was about to change everything, but when he returned home the next day, he was met with something he never expected. Ethan's mansion stood like a fortress against the night sky, its towering glass windows reflecting the city lights. As he pulled into the driveway, he glanced at the twin girls in the back seat. They hadn't said much since getting in the car. They sat close together, their small hands gripping each other as if afraid they'd be separated. He turned off the engine and faced them. "You'll stay here tonight. I'll figure things out in the morning." The bolder twin, Emma, he'd learned, nodded hesitantly. The quieter one, Ella, just stared at him with wide, wary eyes. Neither of them seemed convinced this wasn't a dream. Inside, the warmth of the mansion wrapped around them like an unfamiliar embrace. The grand chandelier cast a soft golden glow over the marble floors. Ethan led them to a spacious guest room, complete with a fireplace and plush bedding. The girls stepped inside cautiously, their shoes dripping onto the expensive carpet. "This room is yours for now," he said, folding his arms. "There are fresh clothes in the closet. Take a shower, get some rest." Emma turned to him, her tiny voice almost a whisper. "Why are you helping us?" Ethan hesitated. Why, indeed? He could have driven away. He should have. He didn't do charity. But the truth was, he didn't have an answer. He cleared his throat. "Because I can." The girls exchanged a look, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Emma gave a small nod. "Thank you." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he turned and left, shutting the door behind him. As he walked down the hall toward his room, something felt different. The house, usually cold and silent, suddenly felt less empty. But what he didn't know was that by morning his world would be turned upside down. Ethan barely slept that night. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the events of the evening. Why had he stopped? Why had he brought them here? He had spent years keeping his life simple, untouched by emotions, and yet two little girls crying in the rain had made him question everything. By morning, he convinced himself it was temporary. He would call someone, child services, a charity, anyone who could take responsibility. He wasn't built for this. Stretching his stiff shoulders, he stepped out of his bedroom and made his way downstairs. The mansion was silent, but something felt different. Then he heard it. Soft giggles. Ethan frowned, following the sound toward the kitchen. The sight that greeted him nearly made him stop in his tracks. The twins were sitting on the floor, their tiny bodies wrapped in clothes far too big for them. his clothes. Emma wore one of his crisp button-down shirts, the sleeves hanging past her hands, while Ella was swallowed by one of his cashmere sweaters. And in front of them, a complete mess. Flour covered the marble countertops. A half-empty milk carton lay on its side, dripping onto the floor. A bowl of pancake batter, or something close to it, was tipped over, its contents smeared across the kitchen island. Ethan stared, his perfectly kept kitchen destroyed. Emma looked up and grinned, completely unbothered. "We were making breakfast." Ethan ran a hand down his face. "That's what you call this?" Ella, still shy, peeked up at him nervously. "We wanted to say thank you." His frustration wavered. He wasn't used to people doing things for him, let alone children who barely knew him. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Sit at the table. I'll make something edible." Emma gasped dramatically. "You can cook?" Ethan shot her a dry look. "I can order food." The girls burst into laughter, and against his will, Ethan felt the corner of his lips twitch. As he turned to grab his phone, something else tugged at him, an unfamiliar feeling. He wasn't just providing them shelter. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home. But he had no idea that something was coming, something that would change everything. The warmth of the morning faded quickly as reality set in. Ethan had no plan. He wasn't a guardian. He wasn't built for this. He had spent years making money, not raising children. The girls couldn't stay forever. As they ate, well, mostly played with, the breakfast he ordered, Ethan grabbed his phone and stepped into his office. He scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone, anyone who could take them in. A foster agency, a charity. His thumb hovered over a number, but then he hesitated. His gaze shifted to the glass walls of his office. From there, he could see into the living room, where Emma and Ella sat on the couch, giggling over something on TV. They looked so normal, like they belonged. His jaw clenched. They didn't. Before he could make the call, a knock at the door made him pause. Emma peeked her head in. "We've finished eating." Ethan nodded. "Good. We'll figure out what's next." Ella suddenly slipped past her sister, holding something in her small hands. "Can I put this here?" She stepped up to his desk and carefully placed a small, framed drawing. Ethan blinked. It was a crayon sketch of the three of them. Him, standing stiffly in his suit, and the girls holding his hands. A messy, colorful picture that made something deep in his chest tighten. "I made it last night," Ella said softly, "to say thank you." Ethan stared at the picture. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Emma smirked. "You kind of look grumpy in it." Ethan shook his head, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. He forced himself to clear his throat. "Go play in the living room. I'll be out in a bit." The twins ran off, their laughter fading down the hall. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the drawing, and for the first time in years, he questioned whether walking away was even an option anymore. But he had no idea that in just a few hours, everything would take a devastating turn. The day passed in an uneasy blur. Ethan told himself this was temporary. He would find a solution soon, somewhere safe for the girls to go. That was the plan. But plans had a way of changing. That evening, Ethan had to step out for a few hours, a last-minute business meeting that couldn't be avoided. He told the twins to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and under no circumstances open the door for anyone. Emma gave him a lazy salute. "Got it, boss." Ella just nodded quietly, gripping a stuffed toy he hadn't even realized she had brought with her. Ethan hesitated for a split second, a strange sense of unease settling in his gut. But he pushed it aside and left, convinced he would return in a few hours to find them curled up on the couch, probably having destroyed more of his house. But when he came back, the house was eerily silent. Ethan's pulse spiked. The door was locked, just as he had told them. But inside, the lights were dim, and the usual sound of giggles was missing. He stepped in carefully, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Emma? Ella? Nothing. A plate lay shattered on the kitchen floor. The sofa pillows were tossed aside, one of them slightly torn. A sinking feeling gripped his chest. Then he noticed something, the back door, slightly open. A gust of cold air creeping in. Ethan's stomach dropped. They were gone. His heart pounded as he stormed toward the open door, stepping out into the night. No sign of them, no laughter, no tiny footprints in the grass. A chill ran down his spine. Someone had been here. Someone had taken them. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Montgomery felt something far worse than fear. He felt powerless. Ethan's hands clenched into fists as his mind raced. Who took them? How? He had only been gone for a few hours. His mansion had security, locked doors, and cameras. How had someone gotten past all of it? Without wasting another second, he stormed into his office and pulled up the security footage. His fingers moved fast, skipping through the last few hours. And then he saw it. A black car, tinted windows, slow approach. It stopped right outside the back fence. The footage flickered as a tall, shadowy figure slipped through, moving toward the house. Then the screen glitched. Ethan's breath hitched. Whoever had done this knew how to disable security systems. This wasn't random. Someone had planned this. A surge of panic mixed with fury boiled inside him. He wasn't going to sit here and wait. He grabbed his phone and called Liam. "Ethan?" Liam's voice was groggy. It was late, but Ethan didn't care. "They're gone," Ethan said, his voice like steel. "The twins. Someone took them." Liam was instantly awake. "What? When?" "While I was out. Security footage was tampered with. I need a full trace on any black vehicles that passed my property in the last 3 hours. I'm on it." Ethan hung up and grabbed his car keys. His mind was already working. Who would do this? Why? Then it hit him. The twins had been alone for a long time. Someone must have been watching them. Someone who knew they had no family. And now, someone had decided to take them back. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he pulled out of the driveway. They had no idea whose children they had stolen, but they were about to find out. 1 hour later, the warehouse was on the outskirts of town, a place forgotten by most, but not by the kind of people who thrived in the shadows. Ethan stepped out of his car, his sharp eyes scanning the area. Liam had tracked the car here. He didn't bother calling the cops. This was personal. The moment he stepped inside, a low voice echoed through the dark, abandoned space. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Montgomery." Ethan's jaw clenched as a man emerged from the shadows. Grimy clothes, sharp eyes, a face that screamed trouble. Ethan didn't care about him. His eyes scanned the warehouse, searching, hunting. Then a soft sound, a whimper. His head snapped toward a metal door at the back. "The girls." The man smirked. "They're not yours to take." Wrong answer. Ethan moved before he could think. In one swift motion, he grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against a rusted container. "You don't decide that," Ethan growled. His voice was ice. "Where are they?" The man struggled, but Ethan tightened his grip. Another sound, this time a small trembling voice. "Ethan?" "Emma." Ethan turned his head toward the door. His heart pounded as he let go of the man and strode forward, shoving it open. Inside, Emma and Ella huddled together in the corner, eyes wide with fear. Ella se aferró a su hermana, su cuerpo diminuto temblando. Ethan exhaled sharply, relief and rage mixing into one. "It's okay," he said, softer this time. "I'm taking you home." Emma's lip trembled. You came for us." Ethan knelt down, his jaw tight. How could they even doubt it? Always. The girls didn't hesitate. They ran into his arms, gripping onto him like he was the only safe thing in the world. And for the first time, Ethan knew he wasn't letting them go. Not now. Not ever. Epilogue. 1 week later. The mansion was different now. Warmer. Alive. The once empty hallways echoed with laughter. The sofa was constantly covered in blankets and stuffed toys. The kitchen, a disaster every morning. Ethan sat in his office, staring at a new drawing on his desk. This time, It wasn't just a crayon sketch of the three of them. It was a family, a real one. Ella had drawn a sun in the corner. "Because now we have light," she had said. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Maybe, just maybe, his life had finally begun.